My name is Katie Nelson, and I chose to do my book talk on young adults with superpowers who are not quite well liked in their own universe. It's a bit of a mouthful, but I had a vision for the books that I wanted to use, and that was the best description I could come up with. So it's more or less superpowered young adults who are not well liked, or at least initially well liked in their own universe. The first book I want to talk about is Graceling by Kristen Cashore, and we read this in class, but I read it a few other times as well. Graceling is a world where certain individuals, as indicated by their two-colored eyes, are gifted with an extremely special skill or talent, and Katza, who is the main character, is graced with the power of killing, or so we are taught to believe at the beginning. Now, in this world, in the world of Graceling, all individuals who are graced with any sort of ability must report to their monarch, and they're required by law to serve in their court. And it is at the discretion of the monarch the grace can be returned home, or if they're forced to serve in the court for the rest of their lives. Now, Katza kind of got the short end of the stick because she's the niece of King Randa of the Midlands, and she was already living pretty much at the court, so of course she was already going to serve him. Now, King Randa is ruthless and tyrannical, like many of the other kings, and he forces Katza to do his dirty work, pretty much bullying any of his subjects to do whatever he wants, whenever he wants it. And Katza does not like this, and she has never liked it ever since she found out her grace was, well, killing. So she and a group of friends, including the king's son, create this underground rebellion. But it's not quite a rebellion. It's more of a Robin Hood-like society where they just kind of sneak in and get anybody who may be a casualty of any actions of the kings or their soldiers, and they get them out of the way. And they've been doing this for years. Now, because of this group's actions, they kind of have an underground system of friendship within all the kingdoms, and that's how they find out about a prisoner, an innocent prisoner who was more or less kidnapped from his home. And so one night when Katza and her friends decide to go and save him, and this is all done without any of the monarch's knowledge. So obviously King Randa doesn't know his favorite tool is actually out being Robin Hood, more or less. So during this secret mission to save this prisoner, Katza encounters a mysterious figure who can keep up with her in speed and agility as they fight. And during the fight, she discovers that he's Lyned, which is the same nationality as the prisoner that they were saving. So it turns out the man that she's fighting is actually Poe, the youngest prince of Lyned, and he had set out to find his grandfather who had disappeared. Now, Katz is not really big on trusting people, obviously, with her own childhood and family issues, as well as being graced, which a lot of people fear or praise, but usually fear. So it takes a bit of time for her to actually kind of trust him. And when she does start trusting him, this is where the adventure really gets going, and it's really fun. It's really intense, but it's really fun, and she kind of learns to trust in her own abilities. And Poe trusts her because he doesn't see her as a tool like King Randa does, but he sees her as a person, and a selfless person at that. So as the story keeps going, Katza learns more about herself, about Poe, and about something else that's actually going on. So it's a really fun read, and you kind of see this buildup of trust, and not only in herself, but also in people around her. Now, this next book is one of my all-time favorites, and I was so excited to actually use this in a project. And it's called Hero by Perry Moore, and this is the only book the author has ever written. He unfortunately passed away several years after publishing this book, and this is in my opinion, one of the greatest superhero stories ever told, and I think it has a great representation for characters with disabilities as well as LGBT characters. So the main character is Tom Creed, and he lives in a world of superheroes, like actual superheroes with superpowers who fight supervillains, as well as everyday criminals. Tom is the child of two superheroes, but that doesn't mean he has any superpowers of his own. Now, he lost his mother in a tragic accident several years ago, and that was also when his father was disgraced. And you'll find out more about that as you read the book. More or less, his father tried to respond to a tragedy, and his actions ended up causing several thousands, tens of thousands of casualties. And so he was banned from the league and also hated by the entire world because of it. Now, Tom lives in this world. He lives with his dad, and he loves his dad, but he has to live with this disgrace every single day. And the people's hatred never really goes down. It just kind of wanes sometimes, but it never goes away. And so Tom keeps his head down by going to school and working for the local community center and volunteering. He's more or less trying to make sure that life for his dad isn't any more difficult than it already is. And that's also part of the reason why he hasn't yet told his father that he is gay. And he's not just curious, like he knows he's gay, but he is very uncomfortable with sharing that with anybody right now. So one night during an encounter with a team of supervillains who try to hijack the bus he's on, he ends up developing his own supernatural abilities. So he more or less becomes a superhero literally overnight. And so because of his now superpowered self, he's invited to join the League, which is an organization of superheroes, almost like the Justice League or the Avengers, you might think of. Now, as part of the team building process, their different new heroes are grouped together in their own mini superhero teams. So his team is more or less built up of misfits, but they end up becoming his closest friends and allies, especially when you really find out what happened all those years ago when his father disgraced himself. And it becomes Tom's primary motivation to prove that his dad was innocent all those years ago once he finds out what really happened. And it's going to take a lot of help from the people he trusts. That's part of why I love this book so much, is because it's not about just one thing. It's about friendship. It's about being comfortable enough to trust those you care about and those you get to know. And it's just about standing up for what's right, even when you could lose everything. And Tom nearly does several times. So I always recommend this book to everybody I meet that loves superheroes. Now, this third book you may have heard of as well. It's a Cassandra Clare book, but it's not anything from the Mortal Instrument series. This is actually her prequel series, which is The Infernal Devices, and this is the first book, Clockwork Angel. Now, for those of you who have read this series, you already know the big reveal in the third book. But for those of you who haven't read this series, I highly recommend it. If you love steampunk, if you love supernatural, it's really fun to read, and it's really dark in some places, but it's still a really cool adventure, and there's always twists being revealed. Now, in the world of the Mortal Instruments and the Infernal Devices, as well as some of her other books, I haven't read those yet, so no spoilers, you have this world of downworlders, are pretty much every supernatural creature you can think of, like vampires, werewolves, fae, pretty much anything you can really think of, including witches and warlocks. And now you also have demons, which are slightly on their own level, meaning everybody is freaked out by them and afraid of them. Now, on the good side, you have the shadow hunters, which are descendants of an angel, and they hunt demons and they train almost from birth to hunt these supernatural creatures. Now, there's always kind of a tension between the shadow hunters and the downworlders because they're never quite at war, but the shadow hunters are more or less the policing force of the supernatural world, and everybody knows it. The only creatures who don't know it are the mundanes or humans, and there are quite a few significant mundanes you'll find out in every series, and Tessa is more or less one of them. So the book starts off with her arriving in Victorian London from America to look for her brother, who she lost contact with, and the aunt she had been staying with had passed away, so her brother was her only family. Now she's met at the docks by these two old, creepy women who we later find out are called the Dark Sisters. And there's Mrs. Dark and Mrs. Black. Now, we're not quite sure what they are, initially anyway, but they're certainly very bad news. But they kidnap Tessa, believing that she has some sort of power, and she does, which you find out in the first chapter. And she has the power to change into anybody. She can regain their memories, she can find out how they died just by touching something of theirs. And the downworlders want to use her for this, or at least the bad ones. Not every downworlder is bad, but Tessa doesn't know that yet. And it does take her a while to figure that out because the only experience she has with downworlders, they pretty much abuse her for her power and at one point try to kill her. Now she's rescued by the shadow hunters, Will and Jim, who become very significant in the story and the following books. Now, Jim and Will are parabatai shadow hunters, meaning they have an almost psychic connection when they fight, and they can always tell if one of them would die. And you'll see this if you read the Mortal Instruments with Jason Alec. Now, I don't want to give too much away for the story, but it is a pretty fun ride. Now, I believe this book fits in with the other two based on an acceptance of identity, as well as a supernatural element that includes the main character having their own supernatural ability or superpower. So if you love the supernatural element of any kind of fiction, but especially young adult, or if you like seeing somebody come to accept who they are as they are, which is part of, again, why I love these books so much, then you would really enjoy either Clockwork Angel, Hero, or Graceling. And they all have a special element to each of their stories that makes them unique in their own way. And that is why I chose the three of them for this book talk. Thank you.